In 1992, George Michael sits in his London mansion, staring at a substantial check from Sony Records. Instead of cashing it, he does something unthinkable. He tears it up and sends the pieces back to the record company. This wasn't a publicity stunt. It was a declaration of war. 10 years earlier, Michael had signed his first contract as a teenager for reportedly just $700, now estimated to be worth over $100 million. He was about to risk it all to fight one of the most powerful corporations in music history. What drove a global superstar to gamble his entire career at its peak? This isn't just about a pop idol wanting more money. It's about an artist who labeled his contract professional slavery and sparked a legal battle that would cost him everything to win his freedom. By 1990, George Michael had transformed from Wham! Heartthrob to solo megastar. His 1987 debut, Faith, sold over 10 million copies in the US alone by 1990, with worldwide sales exceeding 14 million. He had wealth, fame, and critical acclaim, everything except control of his own career. The contract that seemed reasonable when he signed with CBS Records had transferred to Sony when they acquired CBS for $2 billion in 1987. The terms now felt like a prison sentence. 6 more albums owed, potentially binding him until 2003. The financial reality was stark. Between 1987 and 1992, Michael reportedly earned $17 million in royalties, while Sony pocketed $95 million from his work, according to court documents. With each platinum record, the imbalance gnawed at him. Michael's rebellion began with his second album, Listen Without Prejudice Volume 1. He refused to appear in music videos, rejected interviews, and wouldn't tour. He even kept his face off the album cover. Commercial suicide for a pop idol. When Listen Without Prejudice sold approximately 8 million copies, still far less than Faith despite its critical acclaim, the tension exploded. Michael accused Sony of allegedly sabotaging the album because he wouldn't play their marketing game. Sony claimed Michael's refusal to promote it was the real problem. What fans didn't know, behind this professional battle raged a personal storm. In 1991, Michael met Brazilian designer Anselmo Falepa at Rock in Rio, the first true love of his life. Shortly after, Falepa was diagnosed with HIV. Michael, still closeted, confronted this devastating news while fighting his label. The final blow came in 1992 when Michael contributed 3 songs to the AIDS benefit album Red Hot Plus Dance. When he felt Sony undermined its promotion, a project deeply personal given Falepa's diagnosis, something inside him snapped. In August 1992, Michael walked into Sony's London headquarters and demanded a divorce. Sony executives flatly refused. One allegedly used a homophobic slur, though Sony denied this claim. Michael left the building knowing he had only one option left. October 30, 1992. George Michael files a lawsuit in London's High Court that rocks the entire music industry to its core. This wasn't just about leaving Sony, he was attacking the very foundation of how record companies operated. Michael's suit argued his contract was an unreasonable restraint of trade, legal language for what amounted to indentured servitude. If he won, the ramifications would extend far beyond his own career. Every major label contract could potentially be invalidated. Music executives panicked. Sony wasn't just fighting for one artist, they were defending their entire business model. Record companies relied on long-term contracts to offset risks. 90% of signed acts never turned a profit. If stars could walk away after becoming successful, the industry would collapse. In court documents, the financial reality became clear. Michael's contract could bind him until age 40, with Sony maintaining perpetual rights to his recordings. Sony appears to see artists as little more than software, Michael declared, rallying supporters across the music world. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Michael won, he'd revolutionize the industry. If he lost, he'd destroy his own career, still legally bound to a company he'd publicly declared war against. The trial began October 1993, turning London's High Court into music industry theatre. What should have been dry legal proceedings became a public spectacle as fans and reporters packed the courtroom daily. "I'm shitting myself," Michael reportedly confessed to his publicist before taking the stand. This wasn't the cocky pop idol from the Faith video. This was a vulnerable artist fighting for his creative life. The timing couldn't have been more brutal. In March 1993, as the case was being prepared, Anselmo Filippa died from an AIDS-related brain hemorrhage. Michael, devastated and still closeted, had to maintain his public fight while privately grieving the loss of his first true love. For approximately 8 excruciating months, the trial exposed the music industry's inner workings. Contracts normally hidden from public view were dissected in open court. Financial statements revealed the stark reality. Sony had reportedly earned 5 times more from Michael's music than he had. In the courtroom, the contrast between the two sides was theatrical. Sony's legal team portrayed Michael as an ungrateful millionaire trying to escape a contract he'd willingly signed. Mr. Michael earned $17 million from this supposedly unfair arrangement. One Sony lawyer reportedly argued, hardly the compensation of a slave. Michael's lawyers countered by displaying a timeline of his career, showing how a contract signed by a teenager now bound a 30-year-old man to terms he couldn't have possibly understood when starting out. This isn't about money, Michael's attorney reportedly argued. It's about an artist's right to control his creative future. As the case dragged on, Michael visibly struggled under cross-examination. The confident performer disappeared, replaced by a man whose career hung in the balance with each question. When Sony's lawyers pressed him on why he'd renegotiated the same contract multiple times if it was so unfair, Michael appeared cornered, his earlier confidence crumbling under the pressure. June 1, 1994. After the longest music industry trial in UK history, Justice Jonathan Parker delivers his verdict. Michael loses completely. The 270-page ruling declares his contract reasonable and fair, and adds insult to injury by ordering Michael to pay Sony's substantial legal costs. The judge's reasoning was brutal. Michael had received expert legal advice and negotiated improved terms multiple times. His wealth and success undermined his claims of unfair treatment. The very prosperity that allowed him to fight the case became evidence against him. Michael was stunned. Within hours, he announced plans to appeal, declaring that English law cannot support professional slavery. But the devastating reality remained. He'd lost everything and gained nothing. The verdict created an impossible situation. Michael remained legally bound to deliver 6 albums to Sony, yet had publicly vowed never to record for them again. He couldn't record for anyone else without breaching his contract. The superstar who once dominated global charts had effectively silenced himself. Industry executives celebrated while Michael faced his new reality. He'd sacrificed his career at its peak for a principle, and lost. The man who had sold 14 million albums was now unable to release new music at all. For nearly a year after the verdict, George Michael's career remained in limbo. His lawyer Tony Russell worked frantically behind the scenes on a new strategy. If they couldn't win freedom in court, perhaps they could buy it. Russell approached multiple labels, creating a bidding war for Michael's contract. Virgin Records and DreamWorks Records, the new label founded by Steven Spielberg, Jeffrey Katzenberg, and David Geffen, emerged as frontrunners. In July 1995, a breakthrough. Sony agreed to sell Michael's contract for an unprecedented $40 million. The complex deal gave Virgin worldwide rights outside North America, while DreamWorks handled the US and Canada. Sony maintained ownership of Michael's back catalog, but accepted a reduced 3% royalty on future sales. Michael gained a new 2-album contract worth $12 million, with royalty rates between 20 to 21%, nearly double his Sony rate. Crucially, releases would be co-labeled with his own company, Aegean Records, giving him the creative control he'd fought for. The $40 million figure shocked the industry. The most expensive artist buyout in history. For perspective, Michael Jackson had purchased the Beatles' catalog for $47.5 million just a decade earlier. Neither side claimed victory publicly. Michael gained freedom but lost 3 prime career years and millions in legal fees. Sony lost a superstar but made a substantial profit on the transaction. The principle that began the fight had ultimately been settled with cash, not justice. When Michael finally released Older in 1996, the music landscape had shifted dramatically. Grunge dominated rock, hip-hop was mainstream, and boy bands captured the pop audience. His 3-year absence had created a void his polished adult contemporary sound couldn't reclaim. The album succeeded in Europe but faltered in America. As Michael's manager David Austin later admitted, the lawsuit dented the armor in his career in America. It blew that candle out in the US without a doubt. The contrast with other artists who fought their labels was striking. Prince changed his name to a symbol and continued performing while battling Warner Brothers. Madonna started her own label while fulfilling her contract. Michael's complete withdrawal from music during his legal battle proved catastrophically costly. Michael entered a period of retreat, refusing to tour for 17 years after the lawsuit. A 1998 arrest for lewd conduct in a public restroom further damaged his American reputation. The global superstar who once filled stadiums worldwide retreated to European success and American irrelevance. Years later, Michael expressed profound regret. In the 2017 documentary, George Michael Freedom, released after his death, Austin revealed that Michael had admitted the lawsuit was a mistake. He turned around to me and said how he regretted it, Austin recalled. The final irony came in 2004 when Michael returned to Sony for his last studio album, Patience. The company he once called Slave Masters welcomed back their prodigal artist, closing a bitter chapter in music history. When George Michael died on Christmas Day 2016, the Sony lawsuit featured prominently in his legacy. His 3-year battle had become as much a part of his story as Faith or Careless Whisper. The fight's impact on the industry was subtle but significant. While Michael lost in court, his public challenge forced labels to reconsider how they treated established artists. Many began offering more favorable terms, fearing similar revolts from their valuable stars. Michael's battle foreshadowed today's struggles over artistic control. Taylor Swift re-recording her masters, Kanye West publishing his contracts on Twitter, and artists embracing independence all echo Michael's fundamental question: who should control an artist's work? The most profound impact was on Michael himself. The lawsuit transformed him from commercial juggernaut to principled artist. The man who fought Sony wasn't the manufactured pop idol from Wham, but a thoughtful creator willing to sacrifice everything for autonomy. The cruel paradox is that had Michael simply fulfilled his contract, he might have maintained his superstardom. Instead, his fight for creative control cost him the very audience he needed to fully express his artistic vision. 3 decades later, George Michael's $40 million fight for freedom stands as both cautionary tale and profile in courage. Michael didn't change the music industry overnight, but he forced it to confront fundamental questions about fairness and freedom that continue today. His lawsuit exposed the power imbalance between artists and corporations when few dared challenge the system. The personal cost was immense. George Michael pop star was no more, his publicists reflected, capturing how the lawsuit permanently altered his trajectory. Yet in fighting a battle larger than himself, Michael transcended being merely a pop star to become something more meaningful, an artist of principle. Michael's battle reminds us that freedom always carries a price. He sacrificed commercial dominance but gained something he valued more: the right to define himself on his own terms rather than those dictated by a corporation. Did you witness George Michael's battle with Sony in real time? Share your memories in the comments. Were you Team Michael or Team Sony? And how do you think this fight would play out today in the age of streaming and social media?